She is still with me. Well, of course you're depressed. You never leave the house. Your life isn't over just because hers is. I'm sorry, but it's true. Don't give up hope. You're going to meet someone else and be just as happy as you ever were. Just as happy. I'm tired of hearing it. What I'm going through, what I'm feeling, it's nobody's business but my own. I don't even know how to begin opening up to anyone who isn't Natalie. 10 years of feeling her warmth pressed against me when I wake. 10 years of whispering to each other in the dark. 10 years of making plans which will never be fulfilled. 9 months of drinking until I pass out on the couch with the TV on. I haven't been able to sleep in the bed we shared since breast cancer stole my wife from me. Hell, I've barely been able to sleep at all, and by the way people talk to me, I know they can tell. They're right, of course, but that only makes it harder. Knowing they're right, and still being unable to do anything about it is such a frustrating feeling, like realizing the right answer after you've already turned in your test. But I'm working through the grief in my own way. It has been a confusing time for me, but I've started keeping this journal to help me process my thoughts. While I will never forget her, in time I will learn to move on. I'm meeting someone for dinner tonight. I won't call it a date, it probably is, but I don't want to put my mind in that place yet. Sarah, the daughter of an older client, is in town and I've promised to entertain her for the evening. I guess she has some self-esteem issues, and I'm supposed to make her feel better about herself. We've chatted a few times and she's laughed at some of the things I said, even though I know they weren't funny. I would have even called her beautiful at a time when I still looked at women that way. Well, here goes nothing. Why the fuck didn't I listen to myself? I knew it was too soon. I felt tense the moment I sat down with her. I should have just left then. Everything was going fine though, more than fine, she was fantastic, but then she started humming that "Damn My Heart Will Go On" song. The one song stuck in her head just had to be the first song Natalie and I danced to at our wedding. What are the chances? I feel like an idiot for jumping up and racing to the bathroom. I don't know how long I stayed in there, but I was half hoping she would be gone when I came out. To her credit, Sarah just laughed it off and acted like nothing happened. She did ask one strange thing though. She asked what Natalie would have thought about her. What an awkward silence that was. All I could manage was my wife would have been happy to see me having a good time. That was a lie, of course. I couldn't exactly tell her that Natalie was the jealous type. If she knew I was out on a date now, then 6 feet of dirt wouldn't be enough to stop her. Sarah is so sweet to still worry about that even with Natalie gone. We're getting drinks again. She was even the one to invite me. I can't believe it. Natalie is the only one to ever chase me before. I've heard girls sometimes find men who are suffering to be the most attractive. Our indifference gives them a challenge, our damage gives them something to fix. I'm honestly excited about it. Even if nothing else happens, this will be good for me. She actually reminds me of Natalie a lot. The way she cups my hand in hers when she leans in to talk, and then there's the way she bites her lip when she's holding back a smile. She even wears the same kind of long dress with the high belt my wife used to wear, although she has the type of body which would do well in something more revealing. Now that I think about it, Sarah and Natalie really have a lot in common. You don't think that? No, it's impossible. Natalie is gone. I wanted to move on, right? And that's never going to happen by entertaining such ridiculous thoughts. Okay, this is getting weird though. Sarah won't stop mentioning Natalie. She spent the whole evening asking about how we met, and what I liked about her, and how we spent our time together. It was hard enough talking about my dead wife on a date, but then Sarah would stare at me as though she was analyzing my every answer. How am I supposed to forget Natalie like this? No. Not forget. I didn't mean forget. I'll never forget, but I think I want to. Is that so wrong? If thinking about her brings me nothing but sadness, is it so wrong to want to be happy? Natalie would have thought so. I promised I would never love anyone like I loved her. I promised she could never be replaced. Could she really still be holding me to that promise? What if Sarah was only a test? What if Natalie is still watching me, waiting for me to fail? I need to go for a walk. Natalie is coming over to my place tonight. I mean Sarah, I mean Natalie, I mean, the girl won't stop calling me. I'm getting text messages every 10 minutes. Whatever I turn the conversation to, she always redirects it back to my dead wife. Natalie is still with me, I know it. She doesn't want me to move on. When she comes over tonight, I'm going to ask her straight out. If she says she's Sarah, if she says she isn't my wife, I'll leave it at that. But if she admits her spirit is still here, I don't know. I'll do whatever I can to help her find peace. Natalie has traveled to the other side. I'm finally free. For the first time since her death, her presence is finally gone. I didn't have the courage to ask the girl right away. I could tell she was reserved too, so we both had a couple of drinks. I knew I needed to ask, but it still felt so awkward and wrong, so I just kept drinking. Finally I was able to push the words out. Are you really Sarah, or are you Natalie's spirit? I'm everything she was, she said, and she kissed me. I closed my eyes, and I could taste Natalie's lips. I ran my fingers through Natalie's hair, and felt my wife's hands on my chest. It was so good to hold her again, even if this was the last time. It was so good to feel her skin beneath my hands. It was so good to choke the life out of her, sending her spirit back to rest. I hope she stays gone. This is the third time I've had to send Natalie back to the other side. I'm working through my grief in my own way though, and once Natalie has finally let go of me, I think I'll be able to let go of her too. As long as I have a body beside me, I think I can finally sleep in my bed again tonight. Sometimes a song is just a song. Sometimes a smile is just a smile. Some people are meant to be alone. Next story. Dead man floating. I found the first floater when I was 7 years old. It had washed up on the shore about 100 yards from my family's summer house. It still looked mostly human, a bit swollen and decomposed, but whole enough for me to immediately recognize what it was. Even as a kid, I was never very squeamish. I used to watch my father skin the deer he caught on his hunting trips, and I would clean my own fish whenever I reeled one in from the salty lake. Finding a human body was the best thing that could have happened to me that summer. I thought about telling my parents, but there's no way they would let me play with it. Heck, they might even ban me from going down to the water at all, a thought which my 7-year-old brain equated to nuclear holocaust, an asteroid destroying the Earth, or other disasters of similar magnitude. So I did what any clear-thinking 7-year-old would do. I gathered up all the other kids I knew and charged them $5 each to poke it with a stick. The salt water preserved it well enough for us to stomach the smell, but poking it would release some of the bloated gas still trapped in the carcass. I told them they could have their money back if they could lick it without throwing up. No one got their money back. I made $60 before one of the little snitches told his mother and she called the police. Next summer when I came back, the first thing I did was race back to the same spot. Sure enough, there had been 2 more bodies to wash up over the winter. These must have been sitting out in the sun for a while though, because I couldn't even get close to them. My father had followed me that time, and I wasn't allowed to have any fun. The police said these bodies must be new, since they would have been completely rotten if they had been down there for a year. Over the next 10 years, there had been another 3 bodies found beside the lake. Each was slightly more decomposed than the last, but the police still insisted they had to be separate incidents because they were all still too fresh. None of them could be identified, and as they didn't fit any missing persons within the entire state, the police had no leads to discover who was dumping the bodies. They had given up, but I was never able to put the mystery out of my mind. I had my own theory. I decided those people didn't just die in the lake, they lived in it too. I thought that when they die, they float to the surface just like when humans die, they're buried in the ground. In retrospect, the idea didn't really make sense, but it had started forming when I was so young that I refused to let go until the mystery had been resolved. When I was in college, I became scuba certified for the sole purpose of finding where those bodies were coming from. I rented my own equipment and went back to that lake the summer of my freshman year. The water was incredibly buoyant from all the salt, and it took almost 20 pounds of weights before I would finally sink to the floor. It was slow progress working my way through the lake, 6 separate dives before I found what I didn't even know I was looking for. A sunken plane. I don't know how long it had been down here, but it looked rusted as shit. One of the doors had completely rusted off, and I was able to enter and look around. There were 2 more bodies inside, no more than skeletons now. The inside of the plane was compartmentalized almost like it was broken into sealed jail cells. The locks on some of the cells had long since rusted open, and I'm guessing these are where the floaters came from. If they were in their own pressurized air chambers, then that explains how they were preserved for so long. As the plane deteriorated, they must have broken free and floated to the surface one by one. My most important discovery was the black box, although it was painted bright orange, so it's a pretty stupid name. I brought it back with me and swam to the surface to research my findings. The plane was a Douglas C-47, which was used for military transport during World War II. They were still being used for decades afterward though. Some remained operational even up to 2012, so I still don't know how long it's been there. The flight data recorder had completely deteriorated, but the cockpit voice recorder still had some salvageable tape. Most of it was fuzzy or jumpy, but here is what I have. 164, Roger, something I couldn't make out. Unable to make out your last message. Please repeat. It's out. Repeat, one of them has gotten out. Has the cockpit been compromised? Negative. Cell block is, couldn't hear. Please repeat, Captain. Repeat, cell block is compromised. It's letting the others out. Fucking Christ. Remain calm, Captain. Can you neutralize the test subject? Not without compromising cockpit. How far am I from the landing field? Something unintelligible. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? Something unintelligible, not granted permission land. Well then, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Something, mission terminated. Thank you for your service, Captain. My service ain't over until I bring this bird down. You're ordered to force collision. Test subjects must not escape. Like hell I am. I'm bringing her down into some water now. Request rescue operations. Mission terminated. Rescue operation denied. After that, all I could hear was engine sounds. It went on for about 5 minutes, and I was about to stop listening when I heard something like a snarling tiger. I guess I haven't changed that much since I was a kid, because I still don't want to bring this into the police. I've got another dive planned next week, and I'm going to try to break open the remaining cell blocks to get a look inside. I'll admit I was pretty hesitant about making my second dive. Just to be safe, I decided not to go on this one alone. 2 nights ago I reconnected with Antoine, one of the boys who found some of the original floaters with me. He still remembered trying to lick the body to get his $5 back, and we laughed about it. I guess that sort of thing only happens once in your life. I showed him the audio recordings I pulled from the black box and talked him into joining me. He didn't have dive equipment, but I knew I'd feel better with him in the boat. Notice feeling anything strange since you licked it? I asked him while we were rowing out to the middle of the lake. What kind of strange? You mean besides puking my guts out? Warts. New birthmark in the shape of a pentagram. Sudden urge to kill people. You know, something like that. Not that I can think of, he admitted. Except for my ability to talk to animals. What? Seriously? Yeah. He smirked. They just don't talk back. Keep pulling your weight or the boat is going to start turning in circles. Reading too many horror stories online must have made me paranoid. I don't know what I was so afraid of in the first place. The visibility was good underwater, and I didn't even see any fish besides a host of little black water slugs scootering around. Instead of weights, this time I just used a crowbar to sink me down to the plane. The doors were so rusted they were starting to unfasten on their own, so it was no problem breaking the lock off. I was tense, but I remembered to force myself to keep breathing evenly through the regulator. Holding my breath underwater could easily result in an arterial gas embolism. Then I'd be the next floater they found washed up on the beach. Even without the lock, the room was still pressure sealed with an air pocket inside. I tried leveraging the crowbar, but I still couldn't pry the door open against the weight of all that water. I managed to hammer on the door with the metal bar until a leak appeared. The wider I forced the hole, the more water flowed through to equalize the pressure. Once it was full, it should swing open without a problem. I finally worked the crowbar all the way through the door, but this time it got stuck. That's weird, because the water was flowing freely around it, so there should be plenty of space to pull it back. It was almost as if something were holding it from the other side. That was a thought I could have done without. I freaked and dropped the crowbar, but without its weight, I began to immediately float back towards the surface. I held onto the door frame to keep myself from slipping upwards, but it was almost impossible to swim further down against my buoyancy. Luckily, I didn't have to. The cell finished flooding, and the door began opening on its own. Suddenly I was face to face with a dead body. Its skin had long since begun to rot away, especially around its eyes and mouth where there were just gaping holes remaining. My crowbar had stuck straight into its side where it had gotten stuck. I was about to pull myself down toward it along the door frame when I noticed the crowbar was sliding back out. No. Not sliding. The body's hands were wrapped around the bar. They were pulling the crowbar out of its side. Had I jolted upward too quickly when I let go of the bar? Maybe I already suffered a stroke from the gas embolism without noticing. The body lurched toward me. Slow, even breaths. Don't stop breathing. Easier said than done with a dead body clambering up toward you. It was fast too, driven with a purpose. Legs and arms with openly rotten sinews moved effortlessly through the water like a practiced swimmer. I pushed my way out of the plane, but the body was right behind me. It dropped the crowbar and began ascending smoothly through the water toward me. It was just as fast as me even though I had fins. Shit. I kicked hard, and without any weight I was raising way too swiftly. I couldn't stop myself. I felt the air expanding in my lungs so rapidly it felt like they would burst. I was practically screaming underwater, trying to get as much air out as I could. Once I hit the surface, the scream finally became audible, although it was little more than a wheezing gasp at that point. The boat? Where was the boat? Antoine, get your ass over here. He was leaning over the boat and peering down into the water, about 50 yards away. Fuck. I looked down and saw the shadow of the body swiftly ascending toward me. I swam hard toward the boat. Antoine wasn't reacting. There's no way he didn't hear me. Why the hell didn't he start rowing? He was just staring into the depth, his face about an inch from the water. Antoine, I swear to God, but my lungs felt like they were on fire. I couldn't take a full breath yet. All the air I had was going into keeping my legs kicking. The shadow was right underneath me now. 10 feet from the boat, I ducked my head underwater and paddled as hard as I could. Too slow, the body was intercepting me. It was going to block my route. About 5 feet away from safety, it surfaced directly between me and the boat. But it wasn't an explosive surface like something swimming upward. It just floated there, face down in the water, looking as dead as I felt. I had to push the body out of the way to get to the boat. I kept expecting a hand to grab my ankle and pull me back down, but there was nothing. I climbed into the boat and fell on my back panting. My mask was cloudy, so I ripped it off. As soon as I could kneel again, I practically shoved Antoine straight into the water. "What the hell is wrong with you?" The push pressed him against the side of the boat. He tensed and relaxed, but didn't turn away from the water. It was like trying to wake someone from a deep sleep. He was just vacantly staring at the floating body now. The body was moving again though, its ear was anyway. Not a natural movement anymore, not like the body was moving on its own. It was like there was something inside trying to crawl out. As I watched, one of the black slugs pushed its way out of the ear. It got stuck part way and had to gnaw its way through the rest of the cartilage with razor-sharp teeth like a leech. As it struggled out, the whole corpse shook like it was having a seizure. "It looks like you had it wrong," Antoine said in a sleepy voice. Did he just wake up? There's no way he could have slept through that. His face was still down next to the water though, and I couldn't get a clear look at him. "What do you mean?" "The floaters we found weren't the test subjects," he replied, finally pulling away from the water. His body was shivering slightly, somewhere between freezing to death and full-body ecstasy. The tail end of a black slug had just finished slipping into his ear. Of course they were. Why else would they be in the cells? I asked. By the time the words were out of my mouth, I had already realized it. The bodies weren't the test subjects. The bodies were hosts to the test subjects. And they had already been free in the water since all those years ago when the first floater broke free. Next story. I loved her in the winter. I can take care of myself. I'm not crazy, you know. Why does everyone think I'm crazy? No one thinks you're crazy, Dad. Dementia is nothing to be ashamed of. It's a common medical condition with people your age. You wouldn't have locked me up in here if you didn't think I was crazy. When is Elise going to pick me up? It's the same conversation every time I visited Dad in the Forest Glen retirement home. At first he just started forgetting what things were named. Pepsi became a bubble juice and he'd call his dog a woofer. We all thought it was hilarious until he started forgetting who we were too. He thought I looked familiar, but the helpless frustration on his face as he tried to remember how he knew me was excruciating. My childhood, all our time together, my whole life was just being erased. After his wife, my mom, Elise died, Dad completely fell apart. It was like she was his only reason to keep trying at all. He used to passionately assemble model planes and ships, but he smashed them all and wouldn't touch them again. He wouldn't even read or watch TV, preferring to just sit alone and stare at the wall. He stopped taking care of himself and became belligerent when someone tried to help him. "Just bury me already, if I'm such a burden," he'd say. My wife and I would laugh it off, but we all knew he wasn't joking. He was a burden. He needed help going to the bathroom, and showering, and getting dressed, and as much as I told myself that sending him to the home was for his own good, I was relieved when he was gone. That's why I was so worried when I got a call from the retirement home 2 weeks ago. They said Dad was missing. It wasn't the first time he tried to get out, but the nurses always stopped him before he made it past the door. He could barely lift his foot high enough to put a slipper on, but this time he somehow managed to climb straight out the window. If he was lost out there, he wouldn't know how to get back. He probably wouldn't even remember who he was. That would have been bad enough, but the note he left behind made me even more anxious. "I'm going to be with Elise, and I'm not coming back. Goodbye everyone. Dad was going to kill himself tonight. I knew it. I frantically drove up and down the streets around the home, shouting his name, wondering if he'd recognize it or even respond if he did. I checked every puddle he could have drowned in, every bridge he could have jumped from, everything I could think of. My wife was visiting her relatives out of town for the week, but she stayed on the phone with me the whole time to keep me calm. It didn't work. But didn't he forget Elise even died, she asked. He's probably not trying to kill himself. He just wants to find her. I checked back at the house, nothing. I might as well stop by the graveyard where Elise was buried too. It didn't make much sense if he still thought she was alive, but I was desperate. It was about 3 in the morning when I saw his shriveled form hunched over her headstone. Dad? Are you okay? I approached cautiously, terrified that I was too late. He didn't stir as I drew up behind him. Did he just realize that she was dead? Had he spent the last of his strength coming here to say goodbye? He didn't turn from the grave when he finally spoke. I remember his words as clearly as the cold night air. I met her in the spring, she wakes me from my deathly slumber, wedding bells and joyous ring, summer toil could not encumber one shared soul as ours so blessed, and through autumn's fiery air, am I to love her any less, now winter rips her branches bare? Or softly shall I sit and mourn, all the dark hours of the night until once more is spring reborn, and her eyes refill with light? Did he really believe she was coming back? Or was this his way of understanding? I sat down next to him and wrapped my coat around his frail shoulders. His eyes sparkled in the pale moonlight, but not from grief. I don't remember ever seeing him look so happy. But it's already spring, a voice said. My mother's voice. I was watching my dad and didn't notice until she was standing directly before us. Or maybe she had just appeared there, I don't know, but she wasn't old anymore. She looked how I remember her when I was a child. She embraced my father, and before my eyes, he shed his years as lightly as his tears. Dad was growing taller. My coat which draped around his shoulders swelled like a balloon as his muscles became firm. The bulging veins in his hands receded as he held my mother, and his skin pulled taut as the deep network of wrinkles which mapped out his life vanished. They both looked younger than I did now. Mother winked at me from over Dad's shoulder. She held a finger to her lips and said, "It'll be our little secret, okay? Let's all go home." My wife called a dozen times over the next week. I just told her everything was fine and we'd talk about it when she got back. It was better than fine though, I felt like I was living inside a dream. I woke every morning to my mom's scrambled eggs and French toast. I wanted to call in sick from work and spend every minute with them, but she insisted I still go and threatened to drive me there herself. Every night I'd return to watch Dad rebuilding his models, swearing good-naturedly when he couldn't find a piece. Then we'd all eat dinner as a family and watch a movie together, Dad making sarcastic comments throughout, and Mom giggling like a schoolgirl with a crush. I've never seen them so happy. I've never remembered being so happy. They had aged so slowly over the years and I had pulled away from them so gradually that I never really dwelt on how close we once were. It was just like being a kid again. After a disagreement at work, someone even shot back that I smelled funny. Who since the 3rd grade has ever used an argument like that? I couldn't wait for my wife to get home. I'd kept my parents a secret from everyone, and I was so pleased with myself for resisting the urge to tell her. Sure, they couldn't live with me forever, but just seeing the look on my wife's face when she walked in would be priceless. When I picked her up from the airport, she seemed a little withdrawn. I tried to kiss her, but she pulled away. Have you been okay alone? You've been taking care of yourself, right? I just laughed. She seemed worried about me. Maybe she was tired from traveling, maybe her relatives stressed her out, but as soon as I showed her what had happened she would forget all about it. "Welcome home, dear," my mother said when I opened the door. And isn't she darling? How was the trip? My father asked. I just watched my wife's face, unable to contain my gigantic grin. She was shocked all right. Her mouth was just hanging open. Then she coughed and covered her nose. Well? What do you think? I asked her. I think I'm going to be sick, she said, and she was. Right there on the entry mat. The smell of her vomit was like some kind of trigger. Suddenly the whole house smelled absolutely rancid. Do you smell that, Mom? What is it? Mom, what was left of her decaying body, was propped up on the sofa. Dad, bloated from gas and covered with a yellow-green mold, was sitting in his armchair. I couldn't understand what happened. My wife ran out and called the police. They took away the bodies and took me in for a psych evaluation. The next few days were a blur, but eventually I was released with the diagnosis of hallucinations stemming from PTSD. They said my father had died the night he escaped after catching pneumonia in the night air. They said my mother had been dug up, and that the trunk of my car contained a dirty shovel. I don't believe them though. I didn't even own a shovel. I think they were just trying to cover up for something they couldn't explain. I don't get what the big deal was anyway. Even if they were gone, so what if I did want to keep them? Should I love them any less in the winter? Next story. History written in scars. No, not a cut. Not a bruise from sleepwalking or a bang where I drunkenly hurt myself without remembering. I'm talking jagged, gnarly, vicious scars which looked like they'd healed years ago. The first one to appear was an inch-long incision on my stomach, almost like a surgical wound. I live in college with a roommate, Robert, but he didn't remember anything happening. Then I called my parents and asked them if I'd ever had a surgery before, but the only procedure I'd undergone was having my wisdom teeth removed, a dead end, unless they thought the stomach was a shortcut to the mouth. I figured that I just hadn't noticed it before. Or perhaps something traumatic happened, and I completely blocked out the memory, but I didn't worry about it. I played basketball in high school and have had my fair share of being knocked around, so it must have been from something then. Those were the glory days, man. I play on my collegiate intramural team now, but it's just not the same. I was a school hero back then, but life goes on, you know. All the victories and mistakes I made on and off the court, they're all ancient history. The next morning I woke with a long scar along my forearm. It must have been deep too, and the skin holding it together was stretched like I've grown since it closed. I ran my finger over it, but it didn't even hurt. The skin was slightly raised and hard, but otherwise I wouldn't have noticed if I wasn't looking right at it. I thought about going to the doctor, but it looked so old that he'd probably just say I forgot what caused it. I tried not to think about the scars for the rest of the day, although my buddy Chase noticed it during our practice that evening. I didn't want to sound like an idiot, so I made up a story about this time I fought off a mugger to protect my girlfriend and got a swipe from his switchblade. Yeah, I think I remember you mentioning something about that, bro, he said. Bitch, please. I doubt that, since I just made the story up on the spot. It wasn't interfering with my game though, and I was so tired afterward that I just hit the showers and went straight to bed. I completely forgot about it until I was falling asleep, and then it was all I could think about. What if something was attacking me in the night? But no, that was ridiculous. But what if something was attacking a younger version of myself in the night? Even stupider. I eventually convinced myself that I was making a big deal out of nothing and fell asleep, but it was still the first thing I thought about when I woke up. I immediately stripped naked and checked myself in the bathroom mirror. Man, are you trying to shit a log or a whole forest? I gotta take a piss. My roommate Robert was pounding on the door. I ran my fingers over my chest for the 100th time. A giant cross-shaped scar on my right pec. The undulating lines wandered haphazardly, grotesquely, like it hadn't been a clean heal. But it was healed all right. I opened the door and stared at him. "Have you seen this before?" I asked. "Dude, are you drunk?" "I'm not looking at your—" He started backpedaling. I grabbed a towel and wrapped it around my waist. "Not that, you idiot. This scar. What happened to me?" "Yeah, you got in a fight with a mugger when you were in high school. You said he cut you up pretty bad, but you chased him off." "I never told you that," I said. "That never happened. You're being crazy, man. Just let me use the bathroom, okay?" Robert pushed past me and closed the door. I went straight to my computer and logged onto Facebook. I've had that thing set up since my freshman year of high school. There had to be some pictures which proved, man, I looked like a little shit back then. Okay, here we go. Senior ditch day, we all went down to a river and hung out. I was in my swimsuit and the grotesque scar was on my chest. The ones on my stomach and forearm were there too. I flipped back a few more years, and saw it disappear during my sophomore year. From the photos, it looked like whatever happened was in the first semester of my junior year. When I thought about that time in my life, there was only one memory which burned so brightly as to cast shadows on the rest. I narrowed down the range of dates, and there was no mistaking it. I found a photo of myself running shirtless with the team the week before, no scars. The week after I wasn't present at the game, then after that I was covered in bandages. But that hadn't happened. I remember we started off the season 4-0, and I played in every game. Somehow, there was something about that night which was changing my past. I hadn't meant to hurt her. There was a party to celebrate our homecoming victory game, and everyone was having a little too much to drink. I thought Jessica wanted it, she certainly seemed like she did. There's no way I could have known how she would react the next morning, or what she would do herself the next month when she found out she was pregnant. It's not my fault Jessica is dead. Life goes on, you know. Ancient history. And if somehow these scars appearing on my body were related to that night, and I had to carry them as penance the rest of my life, then I could accept that. If that had been all there was, I wouldn't have been so scared or angry. But the scars this morning were more deliberate. Etched into the back of my hand are the words, "How many cuts will it take before I see you again?" Maybe some wounds cut too deep to ever be left in the past. I wonder how many more it will take before she's satisfied, or whether I'll even survive her search for peace. Next story. My journey in a parallel universe. Just because you're sleeping with mom doesn't make you my dad. Just because you're living in my house doesn't mean you can talk back to me. You could have cooked your dinner with the air hanging between my stepson and I. Emily kept telling me that Jason was going to get used to having me around, but 2 years in, and this teenage shit still resisted me like I was an occupying army. I get that his real dad was an abusive asshole, but in what world is it fair to take that anger out on me? We'd already been arguing in the parked car for 10 minutes. Just go talk to the guy, okay? I said. What's the worst that could happen? That maybe he thinks there's a place in this school for you. That maybe you have potential and can do something with your life besides playing video games and serving hamburgers, God forbid. I don't want to go here. None of my friends are here, Jason whined. I wanted to smack him upside the head, but somehow that would suddenly make me the bad guy. Deep breath. So what? You'll make new friends. Smarter friends, better friends. In a couple years you'll be leaving for college anyway, so why not just suck it up and go somewhere good? I don't want better friends. I want a better dad. Jason got out of the car and slammed the door. Would it still count as murder if he's this rude? At least he was walking toward the academy building now, so I guess I'll take that as a victory. I got out of the car and followed Jason up the shining marble steps and into the grand foyer. Was this a school, or an opera house? The place was drowning in luxury. Thick Persian rugs, walls lined with tapestries, rolling velvet curtains, unmistakable old-world money. Some industrial-era tycoon set up the Ramfield Academy as his legacy, and his trust paid for all the expenses. I'll admit it was a tad intimidating to enter, but Jason had been actually invited to the interview because of his test scores. "Hey Jason, wait up." He was already storming up the staircase. He didn't turn around. "It's room 604, that means 6th floor. Come take the elevator with me." A middle finger appeared between two steps for a moment, and then the footsteps continued. I glanced around, but there didn't seem to be anyone to notice. I sighed and pushed the elevator button. I would have expected some security to keep out the riffraff, or at least a secretary in a place like this. It was eerie not seeing anyone in the converted megamansion. 6 floors, almost 20,000 square feet, but they still only accepted 30 kids a year. It was one of Ramfield's original stipulations when he set up the foundation. Weird guy, by all accounts, an eclectic genius, by some, a mad hoarder by most. I've heard that he lived in this massive place alone without any staff, and by the time he died, they practically had to bring in an excavator to haul out all his random collections. I got in the elevator and hit number 6. The old lift lurched and rattled like it resented me for pushing the button. Music played which would have been more appropriate in a 1920s speakeasy, and it was pretty uncomfortable staring at Ramfield's grimacing portrait beside the door. Jason better not act out like this during the interview, or I swear to God. If I don't kill him, Emily will kill me, and then I'll go back and haunt the little shit. "Is this why you never had kids?" I asked the portrait of Ramfield. "There had to have been women who tried, considering all your money. I can't say I blame you though. I guess I just wish mine was different." The screech of metal cables whirring through their sockets suddenly trended the air. The elevator buckled and heaved beneath me and I was thrown to my knees. The lights flared like a dying sun and the music crackled and vanished in a spluttering gasp. A trickle of light from the roof still illuminated the portrait, but that was all I could see. How old was this thing? Did they even do safety checks, or was this more of a bribe the inspector kind of place? Shit, now the damn thing is stuck. Hello? Can anyone hear me? I pounded on the door. The needle showed me somewhere between the 5th and 6th floor. Now Jason was going to go into the interview alone and screw it up. I was about to start jumping up and down to try and get the damn thing moving, but luckily I remembered where I was. 5.5 stories up, what if it fell? What if a cable broke and I was just barely balanced on the frayed ends? I moved back against the elevator wall on tiptoe and felt the tremendous weight groan beneath my feet. There weren't any emergency buttons or anything, but somehow I was still getting cell reception. I called Jason's phone, but it cut off after the second ring. Little bastard hung up on me. I called again. "Yeah," he answered. "The elevator is stuck. I need you to find someone who works here and send help." I held my breath and waited for his sarcastic reply. "Oh wow, okay. Yeah, I'll get someone." Well, that was unexpected. At first I thought he was just going to leave me here, but then I heard him talking with someone in the background. "Okay," they said. "Not to worry," Jason said after a moment. "It's just an electrical issue. It happens all the time. They're going to reset the breaker, and you'll be right up." "Thanks, Jason. I really appreciate this. Don't get off the phone. Don't freak out on me. You're going to be fine," he said. The elevator heaved again. The music and lights sparked back to life. I was moving. Thank God. And with any luck, the administrators will be so apologetic that this can only help with the interview. The needle slid firmly into number 6, and the doors began to open. "I'm not freaking out." "You're freaking out," I replied playfully. Was he actually worried about me? Was his whole rebellious thing just an act? I couldn't help but grin. The doors opened. Jason was standing there, his hands in his pockets. He didn't look relieved like I was hoping. He just looked bored. I'm not the one who is going to plummet to his death. Where are you? Jason's voice came through the cell, but the Jason I was staring at was definitely not on the phone. I slowly stepped out of the elevator and looked around. No service people, no administrators, no one at all but Jason. Where are you? I asked into the phone. I'm right here, the Jason in front of me answered. I'm on the 6th floor, the Jason from my cell answered. The elevator door opened, but you're not inside. What's the deal? I turned around, but the elevator door already closed behind me. I spun back, and Jason, the bored one, was standing a few feet closer. He smirked. Come on, Dad. We're going to be late for the interview. Come on, man. We're going to be late for the interview. Jason, the real Jason, he'd never called me Dad before. But the two of them had spoken simultaneously. The Jason next to me took a step closer and I instinctively flinched. What's wrong, Dad? Isn't this what you wanted? He reached for my phone and tried to take it, but I yanked it away from him. He shrugged. Whatever, take your call. I'll let you know how it goes. He opened room 604 and closed the door behind him. I was still too shocked to move. I lifted the phone to my ear, but the call had ended. I tried calling Jason again, but it didn't go through. I leaned against the wall and slid to the ground, unable to process what was going on. Was this some kind of parallel dimension? I know Ramfield collected some crazy stuff, but I'm pretty sure someone would have mentioned a transdimensional elevator. Or maybe I had fallen out of the elevator and died. Then the real Jason would have seen it empty, and I really was a ghost. But that didn't explain where the second Jason came from. I tried calling a dozen more times while I waited in the hall, but nothing went through. Then room 604 opened again, and it was too late. Jason came back, followed by a fat man in a suit. They were both smiling. The fat man shook my hand and congratulated me. He was saying something else about how Jason was going to excel in this environment. I can't say I was fully paying attention. It all seemed a bit like a dream. I just kept staring at the smirk on Jason's face. I couldn't be sure, but somehow I knew that he knew something wasn't right. Ready to go home, Dad? Jason asked after the fat man had left. What else could I do? I couldn't go home to Emily and tell her I lost her son. I had to bring him along. And besides, he'd aced his interview. He was calling me Dad. Isn't this what I wanted? But all the way home, I couldn't even look at him. What if Emily wasn't the same either? How could I even tell? Or did it matter if they treated me the same? Maybe I was just imagining all of this because I had a panic attack in the elevator. Maybe everything was going to be. I know you're not my real dad, Jason said. I jumped so bad I practically swerved off the road. But my real dad didn't treat me or Mom right, and you've been good to us. I wish you were there from the beginning. I let out a long breath. He was just talking about me being his stepfather. I forced a smile, but I couldn't answer him. Not yet. It would still take some time to wrap my head around what happened. I turned on the radio. Al, what the hell, man? Jason's voice from the radio. It's what you deserve for messing around in the interview. My voice from the radio. Get away from me. What's gotten into you? Let go. You haven't seen anything yet. Wait until we get home and I'll teach you to disrespect me like that. A dull pummeling sounded through the radio, and then a scream. I shut it off. I glanced at Jason, and he was smiling from ear to ear. Did those voices sound familiar to you? I asked him. My throat felt choked. If I had gone here, had another version of me gone back to my world? Sounds like someone doesn't have it as good as I do, he said. I love you, Dad. Jason leaned his head against my shoulder. I fought the urge to shrug him off. I felt like I was going to be sick. Bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. My cell started vibrating in my pocket during dinner. Mashed potatoes, filet steaks, spinach soufflé. Emily had gone all out to celebrate Jason's acceptance into the academy. I glanced at my phone. Emily, the real Emily, was calling. Ooh, that must be the pie ready. The other Emily got up to check the kitchen. I clutched the phone in my lap. Are you going to answer it, Dad? Jason asked. He was grinning again. What I wouldn't give to see the old Jason's sour expression just once. Everyone I want to talk to is already here, I grunted. Just going to use the bathroom. I raced to the bathroom, still gripping my phone like a lifeline. I was too late to answer by the time I got there, but there was a voicemail. Where are you? It was my wife. My real wife. What happened to Jason? His arm is broken and he won't stop crying. You better have a good explanation. Meet us at the Good Samaritan Hospital as soon as you get this. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to flush the phone and forget that world even existed. I wanted to just live here where everything was perfect. Couldn't I just pretend? Why should I be responsible for what the other me did? I stared at myself in the mirror and gritted my teeth. What am I supposed to do? Huh? Huh? I asked. Are you okay in there, honey? Emily knocked on the bathroom door. I opened it and gave her my most convincing smile. Just making some room for more of your amazing cooking. Come on, let's eat. I waited until she was asleep to sneak out of the house. I had to get out of here. I had to get back and save them. I hadn't received any more voicemails that evening, but I don't know whether that was a good sign or not. I dressed in the dark and slipped out of our bedroom. I flipped on the switch in the living room and... What the hell? I muffled my own shout with my arm. Jason had been sitting in the dark, fully dressed, waiting for me. He wasn't smiling anymore. I knew it, he said, his voice laden with accusation. You're going to leave us. You want to switch places with him, but I'm not going to let you. I don't want him to come back. That's too bad, I said, already moving from the door. Where were the keys? They were always on the hook, at least in my world they were. I don't belong here, this isn't my home. No one belongs anywhere. That doesn't mean you have to leave, he said. They need me. And I don't. Jason said. He lifted his shirt, revealing a frail body which was covered with bruises and scars. He may look like you, but I know him better than you do. He won't handle the switch as well. I bet he's already killed them both. All the more reason for me to hurry. Where are the keys? Stay here, Dad. Please. My breath caught in my throat again. I turned and looked at him, and he was holding the keys in his open palm. His eyes were brimming with tears. Or if you do go, at least take me with you. I gave a jerky nod. He seemed to know more about what was going on than I did anyway, so I might even need him to figure out how to get back. We drove in silence back to the academy. The streets were empty, who else had somewhere to be at 1 a.m.? I turned on the radio. Sobbing. Incoherent screaming. It sounded like Emily. I shut it off. I told you, Jason said. You should just stay here. I'm already gone, I replied. We entered the elevator together. The door had been unlocked, and there still weren't any people around. He pushed the 6th floor right away, and I didn't try to stop him. How do you know about all this? I asked. What even is this place? It's not the first time someone switched, Jason said. I was here on a field trip in school when my real dad caught up with me. He was drunk and angry, and he was trying to punish me for forging his signature so I could go on the trip. I hid from him in the elevator, but he found me and somehow I managed to send him away. I just couldn't figure out how to bring him back. 2, 3. The needle was flipping through the numbers. What's going to happen when we get there? I asked him. Will the other me and other Jason come here? 4. I think so, he said. But I think it only works if the other version is still alive. I think that's why no one switched with him before, his other self was already dead. I've thought about it a lot, and I think that's why he wasn't good to us from the beginning. I think we need to be balanced, and when our other self dies, we turn bad. 5. But if the other Jason is already dead? I said, what will happen to you? 5.5. The elevator buckled. The lights flared and the music died. The only remaining trickle of light seeping from above fell upon Jason's smirk. Who says it hasn't already happened? Jason asked. Lurch. The elevator plummeted into the blackness and something hit me hard on my right temple. I woke up in the hospital. Everything felt like it was on fire. For broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, blunt force trauma to the head, but no one could figure out how I got it. The elevator hadn't fallen. I had gotten in alone at the bottom, it hadn't made any stops, and when I came out on the 6th floor I was beaten to within an inch of my life. The Ramfield administrator had called an ambulance and I was sent directly here. Emily. She didn't remember any of those tearful phone calls. She had been at home when the hospital called her. The interview? It had been rescheduled because of the emergency situation. He hadn't been accepted or denied, and I don't think either version has happened yet in this reality. I can't even tell if I'm back in the same reality I started in. And Jason? He calls me Dad now. And maybe I should be thankful for that, but it doesn't feel sincere when he's smirking the whole time. He only visited me in the hospital for a short while before leaving, but I can't shake the feeling that he's the one who did this to me. I don't know who came back with me from that place, but it isn't the Jason I know. I don't know who he is or what he's capable of, but then again, the same could be said of myself. I feel so angry and helpless and trapped and alone, and I just want to lash out and hurt the ones who have hurt me, but that only begs another question. What if the other version of me is dead? What if I'm the bad one?